Hi everyone, Tiago here. I'm an OutSystems architect and an Agentic architect, and today we are going to start exploring Agent Workbench. But just before going there and start doing practical things and talk about the different parts of it, let's start by the definition of what an AI agent is. And the reason I'm doing that is because I see a bit of a challenge on everyone to know exactly what should be the scope of an AI agent, right? Because so far we have human agents, so far we have automation, but now we have this new player in the market, the AI agent, and not every use case should be given to an agent. So let's explore what an AI agent is, and let's finish here with a more target sense of what should be a correct use case for an AI agent. So let's do this. Starting with a very simple question. What is an AI agent? And to start with this, let me first show you here an image. So most of you are already familiar with this, right? So this is ChatGPT. And a lot of us use this, some in a daily basis, others when they need something specific, right? But what I want to ask you guys is, do you think that ChatGPT is an AI model or an AI agent? And to answer this, let's start first by an AI model. So what is an AI model? The AI model is the foundation of an agent. So this means that the AI model is a closed box with a very complex algorithm inside to take decisions. And this algorithm is mostly made out of really complex neural networks. You might heard already things like transformers and things like that. So it's a very complex algorithm, and the only thing that he does is to receive a set of inputs, in this case tokens in a form of text, right? And based on the input that he receives, and based on the train that he got from huge amounts of data, he calculates that the best or the most suited next token to give is the word blue. And then if we concatenate this and give it back to him, the sky is blue, he calculates again the next word and gives the end. And we do this until we consider that we arrive to the end of the answer. So you can see that an AI model is a static thing, is an isolated thing. It does not have memory, it does not have tools in the way that we are normally giving them nowadays to agents, right? He is just a very complex algorithm in a box. And if you guys want, there is a really cool visualization, a 3D visualization of some AI models. In this link, I will put it also on the description, so you guys can go there and see a bit more in detail what an AI model is. But now let's go into the agent. And this is a tricky thing because despite the fact that all of this hype nowadays makes us think of an agent as an AI thing, right? In reality, agents already exist as a concept since the 70s when we started first to have multi-agent systems used, for example, in factories, in robotics. So since that moment that there was this concept of an agent. And an agent is an entity that has the capability of reading from the environment, of making decisions based on that, and then taking actions. So if you have a piece of code or an entity anywhere in the world that has these three characteristics, so it's something that can read from the environment, it can make the decisions based on some decision maker algorithm, and then take actions, this means that you have an agent, right? So this means that for us to have an AI agent, the only thing that we need to do is to take this middle part that we call the decision maker, right, and replace it by an AI model. And by doing that, if we complete the concept of having different types of inputs, like user input, giving a database information, or giving a web page, and we also give him the capability of in taking actions upon the environment, right? Like giving responses or calling tools to write on databases, run logic, whatsoever. So this means that we are facing an AI agent. So if we want to look into an AI agent, an AI model, and compare it, for example, with ourselves, this means that having an AI model is the same thing of us having a brain. If we look it in our brains alone, they cannot do much, right? Only our brains, or our brains alone, cannot interact with the environment. They cannot take action upon the environment. They can make decisions, but they cannot do anything rather than making those decisions, right? To do this, a brain needs to have inputs. He needs to have eyes, he needs to have ears, he needs to have a nose, so that he can get data from the environment. And at the same time, he also needs to have the capability of acting upon the environment, right? He needs to have a way to command our arms to move, to touch, right? But he also needs, or he can also use the mouth for us to talk, like I'm doing right now. So if we combine our brains with all our body, including sensors and actuators, we have an AI agent. So in this case, as humans, we are also a type of agent, right? Because we also have a brain, has a decision maker. We also have sensors to read from the environment, and we can also act upon the environment. So we are indeed a type of agent. So far we talked about this difference between an AI model and an AI agent, right? So if we look again to the first question of, is ChatGPT an AI model or an AI agent? If you guys notice nowadays, when you are using ChatGPT, you can see that he has the capability of reading different sources of information. So you can give him documents, text, but you also can tell him to fetch websites information, right? So he has different types of inputs to read from the environment, but he also has different outputs. He can also call tools. He can also generate code and run that code. So in reality, when we talk about ChatGPT, we are talking about an AI agent. So ChatGPT is in fact an AI agent, because if we realize from it, it has all the capabilities to be considered, according to a definition, an AI agent. Now, we talked about what is an AI agent, right? But in reality, we know that he can act upon things, he can read from the environment, but where can we use an AI agent? So let's look into a typical scenario of an enterprise, right? So imagine that we have a business, and that business uses or has a CRM application, or a CRM domain, an HR domain, and an ERP domain. And for each one of these domains, they have a set of applications with screens, they have background logic, and they have their own databases and a set of APIs, right? So you can imagine this as being an OutSystems environment, but also any other technology stack. So this means that we can look into the different layers that the agents can be implemented, right? So considering an agent something that reads, thinks, and acts, right? So we can look into the different layers. And starting, for example, with the layer from the UI, we can have a chatbot, for example, that is implemented in a web page or a web app, and we can talk with him using text. This is a very common use case that we see nowadays. But we can also have an agent that is inside a certain process or on the server side in the background logic of the application and performing all sorts of proactive activities. He can be, for example, an employee validator or an onboarding agent here for the HR system. And then we can also have an agent that it's not on the database because it's not possible to have agents on the database, but he can be specialized in reading data, fetching data from the database with the goal of validating that data, checking the health of the data, making fixes, and so on, right? So we have here in these three layers. But then we can also have an agent coming from the outside, right? Because the fact that we expose APIs to the exterior, this means that we might want also to give the capability of external agents to act upon our systems, right? So we can also have an external agent contacting our systems. And at the same time, we can also have an agent fetching data from our systems to produce other effects outside the scope of these three applications. So when you see, we can indeed deploy agents in a very huge stack of possibilities. We are not just talking about having a cute chatbot on the web pages. We are talking of full stacks of agents that can really automatize, improve, and make our life better. So we talked about what an AI agent is. We talked about the places where he can be put. Now let's see what type of tasks should we look into it. And the reason to do this is because not all agents should be treated in the same way. Not all AI agents are a generic universal AI agent. It always depends on the use cases. And if we look into the three agentic layer canvas, you can see that it is very common in a business that converts or wants to convert it to an agentic architecture. It is very common to have these layers of agents where we have personal assistants that are really close to the user and they are more targeted to talk with the user and to build a relationship with the user. So they need to be more conversational models. But we then have the business agents, and these business agents, they are indeed experts in a certain domain, and they should work under the hood in the background, improving things, automatizing, and so on. And these two agents, they are completely different in the way we build them. And if you want to know more about it, you can check my previous videos about the three agentic layer canvas and the way we can build these agents. But now, going again to the tasks. There was a study performed by Deloitte in 24 that they evaluate hundreds of thousands of tasks in governance, and their goal was to try to classify the tasks based on what tasks should be mostly given to humans, AI, or automation. And so they analyzed the tasks and they created 3 dimensions on those tasks. And they started with the first dimension of creativity difficulty. So meaning the capability of towards a certain task be creative about it and come up with new solutions, new ways of completing that task. Then we have the context variability. And this context variability is the capability for us or the agent to adapt to the task, to the environment, and perform accept changes or variations that might be required to complete that task. And finally, precision. So the effectiveness or the accuracy that you can complete a certain task using the less amount of resources. So in this triangle, what we notice is that before this new era of AI, there was a really clear way of separating human work from machine work. So if we were talking more about precision, it was all about automation, right? Making things work almost 100% of the time. But if we were talking about tasks that require creativity or variability, adaptation, we were talking about human domain. But then with the evolution of AI, we start having more and more modules and more complex algorithms that could approach and could give some creativity capabilities and some adaptation capabilities. And then large language models appeared. And this completely shifts the way we looked before into human work and machine work. Because with large language models and the different types of models that started to appear underneath it, we start noticing that they were really useful for tasks more on the human work side. And this brought a new era to generative AI. So this means that in the initial triangle defined by these three dimensions of a task, we can give automation, or we can give tasks that require really good precision, mostly to automation. So we are talking about things that cannot fail. If they are repeated 1,000 times, they cannot fail. So we are talking about robots, we are talking about deterministic codes, deterministic algorithms, right? But humans, they still domain the area of context variability and creativity. So for jobs that require really social interaction or really complex physical tasks, those are still done by us human. But then we have here this middle of the triangle. And here is where tasks that require somehow of a precision, but they also require some good adaptation and creativity, they lie into Gen AI or generative AI use cases. So we are talking about summarize, we are talking about compare specifications, comprehensive tasks, explain subjects, and, for example, generate codes and functions. We saw that AI is handling that really well. So this is really important when we are thinking about the use cases we want to solve by building agents in the Agent Workbench, because we should always ask ourselves if the task that we want to solve, if it is a task that requires adaptation and creativity, or if it is a task that is just precise, is deterministic, and there is a mathematical way of doing it without the need of adaptation. And this could change completely the way we look into a use case and know if it is a use case for an agent or not. So let's now look into some examples to see if you guys can answer correctly if it is a good use case for AI or not. So let's check the first case. I want to build a ticket support agent that reads help desk emails, and based on those emails, he can create the tickets on the ticketing system so that he can fill the title, the date, the priority, who asked for help, and the description. So we have an agent that reads an email, digests that information, and then using somehow a tool or a logic, he creates a ticket with a defined structure. If you answered this as a good use case for an AI agent, you are right. Because the most important characteristic here is that we are asking the agent to read something that is unstructured, that is the email, right? There can be a lot of different ways to write an email about a ticket asking help. So indeed, the agent needs to adapt the situation to the text that he is reading, right? So this is a really good use case for an AI agent. But also a very important thing is that we are asking him to read something unstructured and then convert to something structured, convert to a sort of a structure, if we look into OutSystems, that has a title attribute, a date, a priority, a requester, and a description. So this is also a very good use case for AI, the conversion of an unstructured data to structured data. Now let's look into the second case. I want to build a data validator agent that receives a JSON and checks if the fields on that JSON, if they have the correct data format. And if they have, for example, if it is a text, if they have a length below 500 characters. And if the validation of that data went well, he stores that result, the JSON, in a database. Is this an AI use case or not? If you answered that this is not an AI use case, again, you are right. And the biggest reason we are considering this is because all of the actions that we are asking the agent or not to do, they are deterministic. So let's see. For you to check if a certain attribute has the correct data format, you have lines of code that can do that. Check if it is a text, check if it is a number, right? Also, to check if a certain text field has a correct length, it's also a deterministic line of code. You use, in case of OutSystems, you do a length of the field and you check if it is below a certain value. And then finally, if everything is okay, you are saving a record in the database. That is also deterministic because you are using a CRUD action to do that. So you see, all the actions that we are asking here for the agent to do, they are deterministic. They don't need any adaptation. There are lines of code that can do that directly. And because there are lines of code that can do that directly, that is more effective because that is more precise. It's faster, it requires less processing power, so it is better to simply use automation. Let's now check the third use case. So I want to build a medical advisor agent. So I want an agent that picks the full historical data of a certain patient, and based on that data and based on all medical knowledge in terms of all books, all source of information that exists, he builds a report and he sets a group of actions, treatments, and appointments for that patient. Is this a use case for an agent or not? So this one is more tricky because to simply start this with a yes or no, we have a yes but. And the reason for that is because this is a very huge use case. Just imagine, for example, this scenario. In this first case, if you wanted to train a human to be able to do this, most likely in 1 week you would be able to have have already a human doing a good job in here, in picking an email and then filling a ticket, right? So we are talking about 1 week of onboarding, right? And the reason for that is because the tasks are quite simple, or the amount of information is not big. In this third case, if you wanted to have a human to be able to do this, they exist nowadays, they are called doctors, and they need to study years and years, and they need to be continuing learning new skills and new information, because this is a very huge and complex task to do, right? For you to be able to check all the history of a patient, so we are talking about reports, we are talking about information from exams, and even, for example, if there is IoT devices like a heart device. So we are talking about a lot of data, but also about a lot of medical knowledge, right? If we see all the books, all the gigabytes of information we might be talking in terms of medicine, it is a lot to process. It's a lot of text. So this means that, yes, you can build an agent to do this, but it will be very difficult for you to have an agent that is really effective in this situation. It will be really likely if you just give him the information and ask him to do something and receive the results from it, it's very likely that he will not be effective. He will not give you good results in terms of quality. So how do you fix this? You break into smaller use cases. So you could have, for example, an agent that his only job is to index the huge amounts of medical data that exists from the outside, and to use, for example, a RAG system to retrieve contextualized information and then to summarize that information to a second agent. And then you could have a second agent that receives the data from a patient, receives the summarized information from the other agent, and then based on that, probably he can already do a better job. But even so, it might be required for you to even break this into a bigger team of agents. So yes, it's possible, but it's not easy. Fourth case, build an IBAN validator agent. So I want to have an agent that picks a set of transactions for a certain business and validates if the IBAN is a valid number. And if so, he updates the status of the transaction to verified. Is this an AI agent use case or not? So, if you took the example from the second case, and if you know, in fact, how an IBAN is verified, you might notice that no, this is not at all a use case for an agent. And the reason for that is because the IBAN validation is a deterministic piece of logic. So it follows certain rules. He sums numbers, it checks characters in certain positions, but all of those operations are deterministic. So this means that most likely you already should have a library, an orange ball somewhere that could do that in the deterministic way. Finally, the last case, a similar one, but let's check here. I want a financial transaction agent that, again, picks a set of transactions from business and verifies if the data is correct of those transactions. So if it has an IBAN, if the IBAN is valid, if it has a date, if the date is in the past, if it has a description, and so on. And he also verifies in the description if there is enough information to track that transaction to a certain operation, to a certain order. So it checks if it has the necessary details about the product and the store and other details that might be necessary. And if so, he puts the transaction into the status of verified. So in here, what should be the correct answer? Is this a good use case for an agent or not? This might be similar to the use case 4, but there is a small difference, is that we are asking the agent to verify the description and check if there are some conditions in that description. And that description is in an unstructured information, right? Because we might have a store that puts first the product name, then the name of the store. We might have another store that puts first the name of the store, including the address, and then the product name, full name. You might have another store that just checks or just puts a product code and the name of the store. So there can be a very many different unstructured ways of filling the description. So in this case, we do need adaptability, right? So just because of this small condition, this means that we cannot do all of this using just lines of code and deterministic functions. We need indeed to have an agent. And yes, there will be a mix of validations that can be done by code and should be done by code. So the agent should have the capability of giving that information to an orange ball, to a certain logic, to verify what it is deterministic, so to check the IBAN, check if the fields are in the correct format, and so on. But then he also needs to do on his own, not giving to a certain piece of code. He needs on his own to validate if the description is well made or not. So this is indeed a use case for an AI agent. So after these use cases, let's recap here what we did. So today we talked about the difference between an AI model and an AI agent. After that, we picked this concept of an AI agent and we aligned the different layers that we could introduce AI agents in web applications, right? So we could be talking about the UI layer, logic, or more close to data, or even to allow consuming or exposing APIs for agents. But then we finished this by also analyzing the different types of tasks that we can have and what are the better tasks that are suited for AI use cases. I hope that this video could help you differentiating the different scopes that we can have. And this is really important because due to that, if we deliver better AI use cases, more suited AI use cases, we ensure to our clients and to our projects, we ensure that OutSystems stays a good quality AI-powered low-code platform that can deliver not only applications, but agentic functionalities to the business and the issues that we want to solve, right? But at the same time, we are starting to have a lot of agents in the Forge, right? Everyone is doing their part to start working with the community and start working together, developing agents. So it's also really important that we start from the beginning knowing what should be a real concept of an AI agent so that we can have indeed better quality of agents in the Forge. I hope that you like this video. Let me know in the comments if you have questions about this and have a great day.